Hello and welcome to Sci-Fi Night Top 5. As the name suggests, this is a new segment of a show where we have a top 5 list based on different random categories. In this first episode of this new segment, we're going to list our top 5 favorite Friday the 13th movies. Jason Voorhees is without a doubt an icon in horror and slasher films. There are countless other movies that have ripped off the style of the Friday the 13th films, and also the type of unstoppable, silent, powerful killer. There are 12 Friday the 13th movies in total, if you include Freddy vs. Jason, which you really should. Keep in mind that this is the official Sci-Fi Night list, but not necessarily the list that you must agree upon to 100%. Before we hit the top 5, we're going to start off with a dishonorable mention, and according to Sci-Fi Night, the worst film of the series. Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. First of all, this is false advertising, and you know it, whoever it was that made this film. Only about the last 20 minutes actually feature Jason wreaking havoc in New York. Oh yeah! And the actual havoc is pretty tame. This is one of the most bloodless and toned down Friday the 13th films ever, if not the most bloodless. The kills are pretty lame, and overall the film is just kind of forgettable, which really is the worst type of film you can make. So with that shitty flick out of the way, we're going to move on to the number 5 part on the list. And we're actually already cheating because number 5 is a tie. Yes, the number 5 spot is shared by both Friday the 13th Part 3 and the 2009 remake/reboot of the original Friday the 13th. So first of all, Part 3 loses a couple of points for being a shameful and obvious 3D cash-in, which looks pretty stupid in 2D. This, while the reboot loses points for being associated with Michael Bay via production company Platinum Dunes. And if you guys didn't already know, I don't exactly feel very good feelings for Michael Bay. Part 3 laid down a lot of the groundwork for what we would come to enjoy and expect from Friday the 13th films. Also, it was the first film where Jason dons the now classic hockey mask, and despite the forced 3D, it produces some pretty great kills, and the finale between Jason and Christina is pretty suspenseful. Another aspect that keeps Friday the 13th Part 3 from being higher on the list or for being alone of a number top 5 spots is the fact that, despite it being the third part of the film, it doesn't really add anything to the Friday the 13th mythology, which some of the later films would do. Still though, this is without a doubt one of the best of the series. Now, horror reboots rarely work out well. Just check out the Nightmare on Elm Street remake for an example, because that was a piece of crap. But the Friday the 13th reboot was surprisingly good in my opinion. I know! Even I can't believe that I'm actually saying something good about a horror remake. And a horror remake that was directed by Marcus Nispel, who made some really boring remakes of Conan the Barbarian and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So, despite those blemishes, I guess you could say that Marcus Nispel has at least directed one good movie. I know a lot of people really didn't like this film, but come on, it wasn't that bad. Jason was actually scary once again, and there were some pretty cool deaths, and the opening slaughter is the most hardcore opening of the entire series. Yeah, I'll stand by that. Unfortunately, the second half isn't as good as the first, and Jason's mother really should have been in the film a lot more. Still though, it was a pretty solid flick. So with that out of the way, we move on to the number 4 spot on the list, and it is none other than the 1980 original Friday the 13th, the film that started it all. I'm sure a lot of people were expecting to see this film higher on the list, but if you look at it as a standalone film or just by itself, it simply isn't as fun as some of the sequels. Overall though, this is a classic slasher film that laid the foundation for what was to come from both the franchise and from other slasher films that copied the style. The atmosphere of the film is good, and we get to see Kevin Bacon die a pretty gruesome death. Oh yeah, spoiler alert if you guys didn't already know about the most famous kill in the entire film. However, aside from Kevin Bacon's death, the rest of the kills are okay, but they're just not as cool, as fun, or as inventive as some of the kills that we see later on in the film. Overall though, great flick, and it started off what we have now come to know and love, Friday the 13th. So, in case you can't already tell, this is obviously a must-see for any self-proclaimed slasher and horror fan. I don't care if you're 13 and part of this goddamn Twitter generation, learn your history. The number 3 spot on our list goes to Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives. Many fans would call this film a zombie Jason entry to the series, but that doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. I mean, look at it this way, we all like zombies, right? Yeah, I thought so. And we all like Jason Voorhees. Of course, if you're watching this, so why not combine the two? And yeah, I should just go ahead and state that this isn't really a zombie Jason, that's just kind of what he's called because of the style. This is also one of the most well-made films of the series, as the pacing, acting, writing, and story actually stand out as being surprisingly good. Tommy Jarvis is a good and likable protagonist, and you can tell the director Tom McLoughlin was passionate about this project. Overall, I'd say this was kind of a surprisingly good entry in the series. It had a lot of stuff going against it, but McLaughlin's directing really made it stand out amongst the rest of the series. The number 2 spot on this list appropriately goes to Friday the 13th Part 2. So in my opinion, this film is like Friday the 13th the original, but better. It's rare for a horror sequel to surpass the first, but Friday the 13th Part 2 just feels like a natural continuation of the first film, and overall a better one.
Some folks claim they've even seen him, right in this area. The girl who survived that night at Camp Blood, that Friday the 13th, she claimed she saw him.
Also, let's not forget the fact that this was actually the first film to make Jason the villain, which he wasn't in the first. Even though he doesn't wear his classic hockey mask and he's just, sporting a burlap sack over his head. Still though, it's a great flick. So yeah, even though the lack of hockey mask might confuse people who don't actually know anything about the series, this is a really fun film. What makes it so great is Amy Steele as a really great survivor who actually challenges Jason and tries to get in his head using her brains against his brawn.
Jason, Mother is talking to you!
Jason, Mother is talking to you. That's my boy. Come, kneel down.
Also, there are some really gruesome deaths and some great music and atmosphere in this. Alright, now before I announce the number 1 spot, I just want to make a couple things clear. This isn't necessarily the best acted Friday the 13th film. It's not necessarily the best directed one. It could have the best effects though. But overall, for me, this is the ideal Friday the 13th film, and it's one that I've without a doubt seen the most. This is Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter. So considering that there's actually 12 entries in this series, obviously this wasn't the final chapter. But in my opinion, it is the best film of the series. Yeah, that's right, I went there. In my opinion, this is the ideal and seminal Friday the 13th film. It has literally everything we've come to both want and expect from the Friday the 13th series. Part 4 really cemented Jason's status as the ultimate slasher villain, and it gave us some surprisingly good actors in the form of Corey Feldman and Crispin Glover. It also delivers great gore and special effects, courtesy of special effects legend Tom Savini. This installment features some of the best kills of the series and one of the best portrayals of Jason ever. It also manages to have a surprising amount of heart and tension. The climax, when our protagonist tricks and faces off with Jason, is also great. Overall though, this is, to me anyway, the overall best and ideal Friday the 13th film, and any fan of slasher movies should definitely check it out, if they haven't already. So that does it for this first episode of Sci-Fi Night Top 5. And wait, before you guys send me hate and death threats telling me how shitty my taste in films is, why not tell us what your top 5 list looks like? Yeah, that's right. Go down to the comment section, after of course pressing the like and subscribe button, and let us know what your top 5 list looks best to worst of the Friday the 13th films. So, as always, I'm your host, Sebastian Van Martinez. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll catch you guys next time.